Hello once again, dreamers, and welcome to episode number 300. It sure as heck took me a lot longer to get to 300 than I thought it would. I thought I was going to get here in 2023. Looking back, I'm even surprised I made it through 2023. But anyway, congratulations to us for making it to 300. And as I said in episode 299, I know that these particular episodes are coming out in pretty quick succession. I wrote so much during the time that I was sick, so I have a lot to record, and I want to give it all to you as fast as I can. Before I get back to our discussion of the Teresa Stone interrogation, I have a few notes about the show. This is an independent podcast, which means I depend on the listeners to help me grow the show. And there are a number of ways that you can help. You can leave a nice rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you prefer to listen to your shows on. You can recommend us in true crime discussion groups and forums. You can also follow the show on Facebook, like the page, and join the group. Follow me on Instagram and X. And if you have $1 or $2 to spare, you can become a Patreon subscriber. Starting at just $1 a month, you'll be able to access dozens of episodes that you won't hear anywhere else. It's a pretty good deal, and everybody gets to listen. And if a subscription just isn't your thing, and you'd still like to make a contribution to the production of the show, you can do so through PayPal using my email, californiapod@gmail.com. I've had a couple of people join in the last couple days, and really grateful for that. I know when I put out free content on a consistent basis, it tends to drum up business over on Patreon. So I'm going to continue to try. I won't be going at this rate. This is very fast paced, but the thing that takes me so long is the writing. And like I said, because I was down with this terrible cold for so long, I had a lot of time and I was able to do that. So that's why I have so much to record. If I had somebody like ghostwriting for me, I could record every single day. But I write all this stuff myself, so sometimes it takes a minute. Anyway, today I owe some very big thank you shout outs to Jane G, once again, on PayPal, Amy M, Lauren C, Kelly B in Arizona, Jennifer M in Minnesota, Sarah B in Tennessee, Jennifer G in Folsom, California, Shelly B in Florida, and Josie C in El Cajon, California. Thank you all for either joining Patreon, raising your pledge, going annual, or donating through PayPal. Without your help, this show just wouldn't exist. All right, let's pick it up from where we left off with our recap and discussion of Teresa Stone's interviews and interrogations. In the last part of the discussion of the Teresa Stone's interrogation tapes, we finished up with her first interview with police, and we went through the entire second interview. It was the one where she was asked to come down to the station to pick up Randy's personal effects, some of which still had blood on them. And in doing so, Detective Rose Warren took the opportunity to sit down with Teresa once again to answer a few more questions. This took place 2 weeks to the day after Randy was murdered. It didn't get intense or anything, but we did have a chance to catch Teresa in several more lies and inconsistencies as she continued to try to weave a narrative that portrays herself as the grieving, innocent widow, a victim essentially, being how her husband had been so violently murdered. In the second half of the first interview, which took place on the afternoon of the murder itself, we picked up from where the detectives questioned Teresa about the torn-up love letter, and we heard her explain that it was from a secret admirer. Based on the content of the letter, these investigators already know that the author of the letter is somebody very well known to Teresa. But it's going to be quite some time before Teresa is going to be willing to admit that the letter was from Pastor David, because at this point, she has yet to admit to the affair. So the best that she could come up with for now is that it was from an anonymous secret admirer 3 or 4 years ago. And also, clearly, they know based on the condition of the paper that it's relatively new. They believe it's only 4 months old, but Teresa is sticking to her guns. She's rolled back on the 3 or 4 years and says she'll eventually say that it's 16 months old, and that's the story she's going to stick to. But at least for the time being, Even so, it still doesn't even look like it's that old. The paper looks very crisp and new, like it was just given within a few months. They talk about the discovery of the shell casing next to Randy's leg when they searched the crime scene, and how Teresa tried to act completely stunned by this. When they told her, we found a shell casing, she goes, "They did?" And this began all the runaround about Randy's gun, which it's a gun that he carries with him to work, and how the investigators know that the shell casing came from a .40 caliber Glock, and according to the information that they're being told from other people that they're talking to aside from Teresa, because they know that they're getting lies from her, so they've got to talk to other people who knew Randy. And they're telling him, yeah, Randy was the proud owner of a .40 caliber Glock, a fact that Teresa had tried to deny that it happened, and then she tried to deny knowledge of it. You already know that they're going to try to get Teresa to explain the presence and or absence of this gun from Randy's possession, and to figure out how he got shot with his own weapon. They spend time asking about Randy possibly being suicidal, and maybe she hid the gun to conceal the suicide, but we already know that that wasn't the case. However, they just needed to get around that fact early on, so perhaps later Teresa wouldn't be able to say, yes, he shot himself and I hid the gun, and the pastor spirited away from me because I didn't want this to be the story of how Randy's life came to an end for the sake of our children and our family. Teresa spent time building Randy up into a man with whom she was very much in love, and they had no problems, and their lives were perfect, and her baby was taken from her, blah, blah, blah. And in order to paint this picture of a perfect family, when it couldn't be further from the truth, we will hear her deny any and all affairs on her part, but in the same breath, she will tell the detectives that Randy was the one who had affairs, not her, and that Randy was the one who enjoyed watching sexually explicit materials on the internet. After making him out to be husband of the year, all of a sudden, when it's convenient for her narrative, he's a porn-addicted philanderer. And, dreamers, like many grieving spouses who would be just spinning out of control emotionally at the shock of losing their life partner. When Teresa's asked if there's anything she needs or if she has any questions, she brings up, of course, the most important things that one wants to know about at the onset of the homicide investigation of their loved one. When can she get Randy's cell phone? And when can she get her bills out of the insurance office? I mean, naturally, right? Those are the things that you want to take care of after your husband gets shot to death. It's one of the first things she brought up during the second interview. I don't think her bills came up in the first one, but the phone did. Teresa then attempts to distract from the investigation by going into this whole long thing about being followed by no less than 4 different vehicles. Yet, she never calls 911. Rose Warren, well, he basically blew it off. He kind of entertained her idea for a minute, but then he was like, okay, let's move on because this is just utter bullshit. So yeah, Teresa's attempt at victimizing herself again to try and get the detectives looking elsewhere other than at her falls flat. And from there, the second interview winds down. So let's go ahead and begin our discussion of Teresa's third, final, and longest interview. And I guess it would technically be 3 and 4 interviews, like interview number 3 and interview number 4, but it was just kind of split overnight. So what they did was they took her into custody so that they can continue fresh in the morning. It will look like the same interview because she's wearing the same clothing. It will start off with a detective named John and Detective Rose Warren again, and then the next morning, she's going to get grilled very harshly and finally by FBI agent Virgil Garner. All right, let's get to it. So getting back to what you are going to hear on the audio tapes that I uploaded for you, We left off where Teresa was denying that the problem Randy had with looking at sexually explicit materials on the internet over and over again. It faded out where she's saying, never, 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 never. I never got that bad, because the clips that I put up for you, they're kind of random. There's no rhyme or reason, but they do go in order, like in chronological order. It just skips a lot. So I'm filling in a lot of blanks. So hopefully it's not too confusing if you do decide to listen to the interrogation tapes. After you hear in the audio the never, 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 that's when it's going to transition into interview number 3. And this takes place on April 20th, 2010. And it's basically going to be an interrogation. And it's long. And it took me a long time to go through all of the material and to take notes and to put this together for you. I do hope you enjoy it, because I know I did. And I'm definitely going to talk about a lot more than what you're going to actually hear in the audio tapes. But the YouTube channel I pulled this from did a good job of getting to the key moments. But you know how I am, and I like to talk smack on everything Teresa says and does. So I'm diving a little bit deeper. In the time since the murder took place, this third interview is going to happen 3 weeks after Randy was killed. Investigators found out a lot of dirt on Teresa and Pastor David. And what they're going to do is they are going to slowly but methodically confront her about everything and break down the things that she's told them thus far, lie by lie by lie. It is my favorite of all the interviews, and it will get very intense. In the audio clips that are in episode 296, you're going to hear some shouting, so it does get loud. And Teresa's voice is very screechy, so be warned. You're going to first hear Detective Rosewarren's voice while Teresa sits quietly, kind of taking everything in that he's saying. He states, I'm telling you, Brother Love pulled the trigger. I'm telling you, this is the motive. This is the reason your husband is dead. It's up to you to tell us exactly what happened, exactly what was going on. As Teresa sobbed quietly in the background, he continued, Now, I've got 20 detectives out there, and I'm going to be honest with you. I've got about 20 detectives out there that want to take this to a grand jury today or tomorrow. They think this is enough evidence against you to have you charged because they think you're involved. Not that you killed him, but you have something to do with it. And when he said that in the video, Teresa's jaw literally dropped. And she's just staring at Rosewarren as if she's in shock. Like, this is shocking. I had something to do with it? Yes, bitch, you did. Rosewarren continued, Do you know why? Teresa shook her head no as she continued to just sob. Fake sob, because there's never tears. He said, Because of this, and he pointed to some papers that he has on the desk. There are images of David Love, the love letter, and the cell phones, or at least maybe phone records, I believe. It's just evidence that's refuted her stories up to this point. He continued, Because the statement you gave the other night to Detective Stewart is full of inconsistencies. And Teresa goes, What? Yeah, shocking, right? Her inconsistent? Perish the thought, right? If she was wearing pearls, she probably would have clutched them. So Rosewarren went on, inconsistencies and untruths. And again, she goes, What? And he says, I'm telling you, they have torn your statement apart. We have a page and a half of things that's just not jiving. Like what? I've told you everything that happened on that day. I have receipts to show you. My daughter was with me. Are you kidding me? That's why I'm telling you. There's trouble here, Teresa. You have got to tell us what happened that day. And if you don't tell us, then I'm telling you. And I've been doing this for 24 years. And I'm telling you, I can see the direction where this is going. And you're not being truthful with me. and telling me that everything that's going on and what you know. You're going to be solo out on a plank all by yourself. My investigators believe that you're involved in this, either in the cover-up," and then she interrupted him. She said, "There's no way. I would never do anything to hurt my husband. I love him so much. That's why I was trying to get rid of this." And she referenced the papers that Rosewarne had on the desk next to him. "That's why I was trying to get Brother Love out of my office. We were trying to start over. I did not want him in my life anymore. I just wanted to be with my husband for the rest of my life. Please tell me." And then Rosewarne says, "I'm telling you, something. But Teresa cut him off again and said, I want to know. I want to know what's not jiving. I need to know." He's going to start with something that he believes Teresa can prove is the truth. And then he will move on to more damning evidence. He replied, "For example, you said you went to the bank to make a deposit, right?" "Yes." "Well, we went to the bank 3 times and they say there's no activity on your account that afternoon." Teresa dropped all of her emotions and said, "There is too. I have the receipt to prove it." Like I said, I think this is just something that they're throwing out there to make her think that they're missing important pieces of evidence. They will get to the stuff that she cannot refute very soon. I don't know why she would lie about going to the bank. I believe she did. I think it's just a glitch that is not connecting right now. So next he said, "I'm just telling you what the bank is telling us, okay? But if you've got a receipt, we'll look at it. But I'm telling you, the bank's telling us 3 times now. We've checked 3 times. Teresa cut him off again and said, "You checked with U.S. Bank? On my line of credit? The line of credit is not in my name. It's in Randy's name." Rosewarne, he was offended, and he said, "They checked both names, okay? We didn't go up there half-assed and just say okay. They pulled up everything. They were very helpful. They pulled up everything 3 times with them, and they're saying, we're sorry, but there's no activity. Now, if it's their mistake, we'll figure it out." Teresa interrupted again and said, "I will pull it up on the computer myself and I will show you. I have that receipt that I went to the bank on the square and made the deposit. I cannot believe this." I believe that she went to the bank, like I said, and he might just be testing her reaction to this because it is obviously something that she can prove. She cannot afford for her true statements to not be believed since there are so few of them. So she must stand by the things that she can prove as firmly as she possibly can, because those few nuggets of truth are really all she has. Also, Teresa literally reacted more intensely to being told that there's no evidence to corroborate this trip to the bank than she did at the opening of this when Rosewarne flat out told her, "I'm telling you, Brother Love pulled the trigger." Way more emotion behind being accused of lying about the bank than being told Pastor David was the one who shot her husband. It's absolutely insane. But anyway, Rosewarne next said, "Well, if you've got the receipt, you better hold on to it." "I will go home and I will find it." Sorry, but you're not going home. Not tonight anyway." "I cannot believe this. I seriously cannot believe this." "It's true, Teresa." "No, I have the receipt from my chiropractor's office. I have the receipt from JCPenney's. I have everything. I was with my daughter. I picked her up from school. I went home. My parents were there. Are you kidding me?" It's hilarious. But anyway, next you're going to hear Rosewarne confront Teresa about the way she tried to stop her son from showing police where his dad kept his .40 Glock when investigators showed up a couple of days after Randy's murder to search the Stone family home. Rosewarne said, "When the detectives came over to your house to look for that gun, to see if there might be a gun box or something, I've read the report and I've talked to them, and they said that you did about everything that you could think of to try and keep them from finding that box." Teresa immediately launched into a very loud, pitchy denial, stating, "I did not. They didn't even talk to me." Now Teresa is sitting here denying her actions that she made right in front of police officers who put it in their report. They reported on her behavior. I told you, this woman is so deeply embedded in her denials that she will even deny the undeniable. And of course, they didn't talk to her. I believe that when she said, I did not, they didn't even talk to me because they want to solve this case and she's full of shit. Why the hell would they want to talk to her? She's just going to lie and hide and deceive. Rose Warren replied, they said that if it wasn't for Michael, her son, that they would have never got that box. They didn't talk to me about anything. That's because you're dumb and you lie, remember? And that has nothing to do with what Rose Warren's saying. They're searching the house. They don't need to say jack shit to her. This is out of her hands, out of her control. And no, it is not in God's hands either. Rose Warren continued, they said Michael came up there and Michael was the one that thought the gun box might be under y'all's bed. He started to look under it and then Teresa interrupted him again. So I didn't quite catch the tail end of his sentence, but with her annoying loudness, she said, Michael knows more about that gun stuff than I do. Again, what does that have to do with anything? Teresa here is starting to spin her wheels. This is the first time that she's starting to get hammered during questioning. So she's got a lot of energy to try and continue to distance and deny. Teresa stammered, Michael knows more about that gun stuff than I do. I don't know what Randy does with it. I swear to you, give me a stack of Bibles. And she slammed her hand down on the desk. And I will swear to you, I don't know anything about Randy's guns. And I kind of wanted to slam my own hand on my desk to kind of give a little dramatic sound effect, but it scares my dog, Rhoda, so I'm not going to do that. And you know what she's saying here, the responses that she has to what she's being told, it all has absolutely nothing to do with what she's being confronted about here by Rose Warren. This makes no sense, because if she knows nothing about Randy's guns, and Michael knows more about that gun stuff, as she calls it, than she does, then she would have let him lead the police to whatever he knows about the location of his dad's gun boxes and accessories and whatnot. But Teresa kept going. I don't know anything about Randy's guns. Michael and Randy did all that stuff. They never shared any of that stuff with me because I didn't like them. Miranda and we don't like them. And she slammed her fist on the desk again. Miranda and I did not like them. We always ran away when it came to that stuff. To me, dreamers, running away when it came to that stuff is an absolutely ridiculous statement. And she threw her daughter into the mix in an effort to make this sound more legitimate because she's the liar. So if she throws Miranda into all this, then Miranda can corroborate and back her up because they believe Miranda, but she has nothing to lie about. She's lost her father. She wants to know what happened, right? She's going to be as truthful and helpful as possible, just like her son. How stupid, right? We always run away when it came to that stuff. So what? She wants this detective to believe that she is so far removed from having anything to do with any guns whatsoever ever in life that she will literally run away from the guns that her husband of almost 20 years proudly owns whenever he brings any of the guns around her or into the room. Oh, and yeah, she'll sleep with one underneath her under the bed. She's comfortable with that, but everything else she runs away. Her husband is a man who she said carries a gun with him everywhere they go. After all this time being with a gun enthusiast, and he's trained, he was in the Marines, she hasn't gotten used to being comfortable around weapons, being handled by someone military trained to handle them properly. Absolute garbage. Rubbish, if I were British. Rose Warren cut this nonsense off and said, you know, he always used to show that gun off. We have people coming in here and say he used to show that gun off all the time at the office. He was quite proud of that gun. Teresa, loudly interrupted again and said, I know he was. I know he was. He showed it to the people, to the detectives or our clients who worked here. She was frantically waving her arms around. She's freaking out now, waving her arms around the room as she raised her voice and she's saying all of this. He always showed it to them. I was never in there when he showed them that gun, ever, because he knows I don't like guns. Again, nothing to do with you trying to hide the gun box from police. I didn't even like him carrying it in the briefcase. Still, nothing to do with the case. And she's more frequently slamming her fist on the table. If you listen to the audio clips, you'll hear it in the recording. You'll hear it in the background. She continued on. I didn't like it at all. Rose Warren said, Mike said that they would clean the gun at the house. Mike, even your son told me that you knew about the gun. She screamed, yes, I knew about the gun. That's not what she said in interview number 1. In fact, Teresa said the complete opposite when she was told Randy owned a .40 caliber Glock. When she was told that, her reaction was, he did? Now that she's being told that her son told them that she was aware that Randy owned a Glock, she cannot continue on with that story. Otherwise, she'd be accusing her own son of lying. This poor kid, right? At the time, he was a criminal justice major. He was only 18 years old when this twat sack commissioned his father's murder with his father's best friend and church pastor. Rose Warren continued, your son said you knew about the gun. Yes, I knew about the gun. Okay, but you told us you didn't know about the gun. Teresa goes on to play dumb, and she says, who didn't know about the gun? It's like, you dumbass. He just told you. You told us you didn't know about the gun. She's totally stalling and avoiding, giving herself time to think of a way out of this. And he repeated, you told us that you didn't know about the gun. And she just kind of went around and said, yes, I knew he had that gun, but I knew he got rid of it. Rose Warren got very clear with her. He didn't get rid of it. That's the gun that killed him. At this point, Teresa started acting like she's interested in the investigation now that she's been told Randy was killed with his own gun. I think this is the first she's heard of this. Well, she knows it, but this is the first that she's being officially told. She says, then, well, who has it then? That's what I want to know. Never mind that one of the first things he said to her when they started this interview is that Brother Love pulled the trigger, right? And they've already let her know that they know about the affair too. So Teresa's growing more and more desperate as she's being slapped with evidence that's completely contradictory to just about everything she's told police thus far. Rose Warren replied to her, wanting to know where the gun is by saying, it's in the same place where these cell phones are. And she yelled back, then who has it? That's what I'm asking you, he said. Teresa vehemently denied everything again. She stated, I don't know. Who do you think has it? I have no idea. Who do you think got rid of these phones? Who has the phones? Or who had the phones? I gave my phone back to this man right here. Now, this is the first lie she's going to tell about the burner phones or track phones. We know what she did with it. She just hasn't been made to admit it yet. At some point, I believe she let them know that she had given it back to Pastor David, or that was her story. That's the story she's trying to go with for now. But we know what she did with it. We know she flushed it, and she will go and admit it pretty soon, or during this third and final interview. Teresa's become quite frantic now as she says, I gave my phone back to this man right here. And as she said it, she slammed her fugly tan manicured index finger on the table on a picture of David Love 6 times. And it's so loud and so obnoxious. You can hear it about 46 minutes into the recording that I uploaded, minus my intro. You have to, the time that I talk all my nonsense in the beginning, take that out, and then 46 more minutes in, that's when you'll hear her slam her stupid little finger into the desk. And what he did with it after that, I have no idea. So here she's claiming that she gave the phone back to the pastor and she doesn't know where it is. Teresa mumbled something else that I couldn't quite understand. Rosewarren, he's good at staying quiet. He will let the silence hang in the air several times, and I'm going to leave it in because it's really uncomfortable for Teresa, and I enjoy that a lot. So she takes this opportunity to put her hands over her face to cry a few air tears, and she sobbed, "No, no, no, he did not do this." Yeah, that's where Teresa's going to go. The surprise and shock and fear and just utter disbelief that the pastor, how could he, right? Whatever. Rosewarren, after some time, finally said, "If he had those phones, he's involved. These phones don't fall off the face of the earth. These phones, this phone, 217, was purchased 2 weeks before your husband died. That purchase was made for a reason, because they knew Randy was going to die, and they needed a way to communicate with somebody, a way that he thought that wasn't going to be traced back." Rosewarren has it a little bit wrong right here, but that's the theory that he's come up with, because he doesn't yet know that Teresa flushed her phone, and he doesn't yet know that the pastor's wife confiscated his original phone, and that's the reason why he had to buy the second phone 2 weeks before, because he needed another phone to communicate with Teresa. Rosewarren continued, and he's becoming more confrontational with her, and he says, "But this one was operating right up to the 31st. And I think he's talking about the track phone that she had. And the 31st of March is the day that Randy was murdered. Matter of fact, of your 2 phones, this was the last one that actually made a phone call. And that was about an hour or 2 after Randy was found deceased. And then they both went blank. And we know that this phone was traveling around the city making phone calls after Randy." Now, did I tell you that we have a video? Did I tell you that? Her reaction to that was, "Did I tell you that we know exactly what time your husband died? Because we have not 1 but 2 videos. We have seen the car, and we have seen the man get out of the car." Teresa suddenly acted interested, because this can be her ticket to freedom, right? If they have a video of the pastor doing this, clearly she's not there then. So she says, "Who is it?" And he's like, "I'm not going to tell you who it is." She placed her hands down on the table again and acted emotional when he said that. And she goes, "Why not?" "I'm not telling you because I'm trying to get some truthfulness out of you. Because I'm telling you that if you don't sit here and tell me the truth about everything you know, I'm telling you, you're going to end up in a whole lot of trouble, more trouble than you can imagine." After sitting there for a moment, Teresa finally said, "I am telling you the truth about the phones. Alls I know is his wife found his phone, so he had to go and buy this phone. Now, I don't know if he got his phone back and she didn't know he got it back. I don't know. I did not talk to him on that day. I had not talked to him since the day he left our office because I was so mad. Randy and I were both too upset, so we didn't talk to them or anything. We didn't talk to Brother Love. Nobody." During this time, Teresa's waving her arms around again, and it's really annoying because it only comes across as a desperate to be believed. We were trying to start our lives over again and just move on because we've already gone to a new church. And this is where the audio clips that I pulled from YouTube gets cut off, and it skips forward to another part of the interrogation. But I'm going to continue to tell you what's being said during this portion. You're not going to hear these next parts in the audio clips, but there's a lot more that I want to talk about. Rosewarren leaned in and said, "This was a planned killing." Teresa started sobbing again as she exclaimed, "No!" And he repeated, "This was a planned, premeditated killing, and more than one person was involved." And she cried out, "Why?" And Rosewarren was confused, and he's like, "Why? And she goes, yes. Why? Why would they do this? And he says, you know why, Teresa. You know why. And she replied, as if she had no idea. And she goes, because of me? So stupid. She says it just like that. I wish she could hear it. I mean, you can if you go through the 10 hours. I didn't put the timestamp on it where it was at, I don't think. But I don't know how far into the recording it is, but she goes, because of me? It's so stupid. Because I wouldn't give up what I have for this. And she gestured towards the papers on the desk. I think she's pointing to the picture of Pastor David. And she sobs some more and she goes, no. And Rosewarren, he finally spoke. He says, your life has been spinning out of control for a while now. It's been spinning out of control. And everything that you've learned since you were 7 years old in your church, for whatever reason, you've taken a wrong turn, all right? Matt was in here and talked to me the other night. And Dreamers, that's the Kansas City police officer who was a friend of Randy's and Teresa's, as well as a client, the one that Teresa accused of forcing himself on her. So yeah, he's about to confront her with that lie right now because, like I said, he did go and talk to that police officer. He talked to me the other night, and he, being a cop that he is, knowing that his career is on the line, he told me everything that happened between you and him. And I know it was more than just a kiss. Teresa was just staring blankly at Rosewarren as he said this, slightly shaking her head yes, and under her breath she says, I know. So, here, for one of the first times, she's being made to fess up to a lie that she told during her very first interview 3 weeks earlier. Rosewarren said, I know that there are things going on in your life that you have, and I'm going to tell you what I think. And this is coming from my heart. I think that you've been manipulated. You've been used. I think somebody has taken you away from your values and everything you believe in this world to be good, and has sent you down the wrong road, and has talked to you and got you into something that you would have never dreamed of ever being involved in. And I believe that. I believe that. And it's a horrible situation. Teresa started to sob again. So, obviously she's buying Rosewarren's lies here, that he believes her. He's running game right now. He's totally trying to win her trust and to get her to open up more. And it doesn't really work as easily as he would have liked, because this woman would not and would never voluntarily provide any kind of truthful statements if it in any way made her look bad. And when Teresa is finally backed into a corner and she has no choice but to admit to her lies in the face of all the evidence to prove it, she will meekly admit to it, just like she did with Officer Matt when she goes, I know. When he said, I know it was more than a kiss, that was her reply. I know. She will hang her head in shame. She tries to make herself as small and as weak as possible, as she claims she did everything because she was scared. She was afraid. She will make that insinuation that she was afraid of Pastor David, but she never said that Pastor David ever threatened to harm her or kill her if she ever told. And to be honest, I don't believe for a second that this woman had any fear at all of the pastor. She had that man wrapped around her little finger. When Rosewarren said that he thinks she's the one that's been manipulated, she's the one that's been used, she's the one taken away from her values, from everything that she believed in this world, everything that she learned from the church to be good. She's the one that was sent down the wrong road. She's the one that got talked to and gotten into something that she would have never dreamed of. When he said those things, I would argue that he was really thinking those are the things that Teresa did. Teresa Stone manipulated. She took people away from their values. She took people away from everything they believed in this world to be good. She took people down the wrong roads. She got people into things that they would have never dreamed of. She did all that, and she did it to Pastor David. She did it to his family. She did it to Randy. She did it to her whole family, the church, the congregation, the community, and she tried to do it to the police, and it didn't work. Rose Warren continued, but the person who has done this to you needs to accept responsibility for their actions in the same way you're accepting responsibility for your actions. You're accepting responsibility because you're paying the price right now, having to sit here and talk to me and go through this. And the other person that's involved in this, they think they've gotten away with murder scot-free. They think that they don't have a thing to worry about. But here you are, and I don't want to see you have to bear the burden of this alone. You have got to open up to me. And if you want any consideration, or if you want anybody to help you, you're going to have to come and tell me the truth. You're going to have to tell me the whole truth. I know that you haven't been sleeping. I know that this is eating you up. Yeah. Dreamers, Teresa's so distraught. She's only been able to go to the tanning salon twice since Randy died that we know of, right? She probably still has his tanning credits and rewards to use up. That's how distraught this woman is. This is how she's losing sleep, going to the tanning salon. Rose Warren then said, "You're not a bad person." Yeah. You weren't raised to be a bad person. And I'm telling you, you cannot bear this on your own. Teresa finally broke her silence, but her question, per usual, is self-serving as she says, "Let me ask you one question. You're not lying to me about anything in here?" You see, dreamers? You see, she wants to make sure that he's the one being genuine when he says all these nice things to her about her. She knows what the truth is when it comes to the murder, and she wants to be reassured that Rose Warren's nice, sweet statements to her are sincere. That's all she cares about, so she could try and continue to hang on to that one little lifeline that she thinks she has when it comes to somehow talking her way out of this. And he said, "There is not one lie that's been told in this room." I thought for a moment that he was going to say, "by me," but he left that hanging there because he knows that there have been a million lies told in that room, and most of them have been told by the woman sitting right across from him. And then he said, "I'll tell you something else. There's stuff that I know that I'm not even going to tell you. I can't tell you. I can't sit here and tell you everything. When you walk out of here, you got cell phones. You got people you could talk to. The thing is, I can't tell you our whole case, but I can tell you that there's more evidence than what's on this table. I'm telling you this because this is a wake-up call for you. I'm trying to make you understand that we're serious. We're not playing games. I'm telling you that there is a prosecutor out there that is chomping at the bit to get involved in this thing." Cue Teresa's air tears. She might as well start producing some actual moisture now that it's starting to become evident that she's getting into some deep trouble. But even then, even in the face of knowing that she's been caught, she knows that she's going down. She still can't cry. He went on, "You know something that you're not telling me? You know more than what you're telling me? I'm telling you." Teresa finally spoke again and said, "I just want to know. If you know who did it, can you please tell me that?" Bull frickin' shit. Of course she knows, but she's still trying to pretend that she doesn't. Even though, again, one of the first things Rose Warren told her when she sat down with him for this third interview was David Love, Pastor Love, pulled the trigger. He said, "We have our suspicions. And I'll tell you, within a few weeks, we're going to know for sure. But by then, it's going to be too late. If you're holding back, it's going to be too late. Because like I said, right now, I've got people out there that honestly believe you've been holding back, that you have not told us everything, that you know about this situation, and that in and of itself will get you charged in a court of law. On a case like this, anybody who does not cooperate fully and disclose everything that they know is subject to get drawn into this net. And those that are cooperative and fully honest and come to us and say, this is what happened, the first person that comes through that door, comes into this office and makes that statement, this is the person that gets consideration. That is the person that looks like they have a conscience. That is the person that looks like they actually care about what happened that day. And they want justice. And they're willing to accept responsibility. That is the person that is going to get back on the road to where they need to be, especially with their Lord. I'm telling you, if you know something and you don't confess now, you're not going to be able to get through this. Teresa's not sobbing or crying at this point. She adjusts herself in her seat. She sits up, and she looks like she's about to try a new strategy here. So, let's see what happens. Teresa finally spoke again, and she's pretty calm. Can I ask you one question? Yeah. Do you think he did it? Yeah, no. Dreamers, Teresa's playing the same games that she's been trying to play, playing dumb, and she knows damn well that he did it. Then she continues, be honest with me. That's rich. Asking him to be honest with her? Whatever. Rose Warren said, I'm not here to talk about him right now. And then she yelled, no! I need to know! But the detective won't give in to answering her questions that he knows she knows the answers to. He says, I'm not here to talk about him right now. I need to talk about you. We'll talk about David when we need to talk about David. We'll talk about other people that we're looking at. We'll talk about them when the time comes. But we're talking about you tonight. This is your time. This is your time to help us solve this crime. It's your time to tell me what you're not telling me. Teresa is desperately trying to redirect the topic onto something, anything else other than herself when she next says, I'm telling you about these phones. That's all I know about these phones. So she just picked the first thing that she could think of. There's a bunch of evidence about the track phones sitting there on the desk. So it's probably all that she could think of really fast to try to wiggle her way out of this. She tried to continue with that, stating, I know he bought this one because his wife found this one. Now, if he got this one back, I don't know. Again, nothing to do with what Rose Warren has been talking about for the past 10 minutes. He didn't tell me that. He just told me not to call it, so I didn't. I was trying to ignore it. I know he called my phone, but I wouldn't answer it. And by the way, the detectives are onto this pattern of calling and leaving each other voicemails and then listening to the voicemails and deleting them. That's their way of trying to hide what they're doing. So they're onto it. They made a habit of it because they're thinking that once the voicemails are deleted, they can't be recovered. Later on, Teresa's going to be told that they can get those voicemails. I'm not sure if they can or not. I Googled it, I think, at one point, and on track phones, I think you can. But in this situation, of course, David's going to be calling, and she's not going to be answering because what they did was leave voicemails. That was their own private way of communicating. Teresa continued with her lies. I did not want to talk to him. What that means is that's code for she didn't want to leave a digital trail. I wanted to start over with my life. Yeah, you did. You notice she didn't say start over with our life. She wanted to collect up on Randy's insurance and start her life over with. She probably most likely wanted to start that life over with David, but was willing to sacrifice him to make sure she could start her life over with on her own. Because eventually she'd manipulate some other men out there, I'm sure, which is probably what she's out there doing right now. She straight out said it just like that, though. I wanted to start over with my life. And the next things that Rose Warren asks will be included in the audio clips that I've uploaded for you. So you'll be able to hear what we're going to talk about next. And what we're going to talk about next is they're going to try to get, or Rose Warren is going to try to get Teresa to admit to the affair. She has yet to do that. So he says, tell me, what was the nature of your relationship with David, truly? Teresa sat there in silence for a few moments before Rose Warren then said, if you can't do that much, I can't help you, Teresa. If you can't even be honest about that, I cannot help you. She sat there in silence for a few moments again. It is really like pulling teeth with this woman to get her to take any kind of responsibility, when she should damn well know that Rose Warren already knows everything. He's not stupid, but I don't even see how she can be that stupid. Finally, Teresa replied with an answer I would call an answer non-answer by saying, well, obviously he was in love. And I guess at one point I was too. Rose Warren asked, how long ago? And you know, dreamers, we all know that this woman is still very much in love with this man, even as they sit here talking about having him murder her husband at her behest. It was apparently something that she couldn't deny knowing, because how much proof there is out there that they were still pretty much in regular contact. They didn't think they were going to get caught, so they kept talking on those track phones, or at least leaving voicemails. So she said, well, until just recently. And you'll notice that Teresa's completely unemotional now. She's very matter of fact. I guess having to be truthful will do that to you. She continued after some very long pauses. Probably a couple of weeks ago. No, probably a month ago. Yeah. So she's telling us when she stopped loving him. A couple of weeks ago? A month ago? Like, how do you measure that? How do you measure when your feelings suddenly stop? It's absolutely absurd. And she also slipped up right there really badly when she provided this timeline, because a couple of weeks ago places her admission of still being in love with Pastor David after he murdered her husband. And that just is so evil and disturbing. Placing her feelings for David having come to an end probably about a month ago, which is what she rolled back to, puts that prior to Randy's death. She literally just admitted to being in love with the guy after knowing he killed her husband. It's neither here nor there for me, because I don't think this woman just all of a sudden flipped her feelings for David off just like that after one heated confrontation. If anything, that confrontation escalated things. It hastened Randy's murder. That confrontation gave these two cheating pieces of shit even more motivation to get that murder done. It only fueled their desire for one another. It didn't diminish it, as Teresa is attempting to suggest here. Rose Warren replied, about a month ago, you felt like you were in love? Teresa quickly shot back and goes, No. A month ago, I wanted it to end. I wanted to start my life fresh with Randy. Well, let's back up. I need to know what kinds of things have been going on between you and him before you decided that you wanted to put an end to this thing. Because I know that it just wasn't phone calls. It couldn't have been. As he was saying all of this, Rose Warren had a photo of the love note in his hand, staring at it, knowing that it was just a few months ago that she got that note and carried it around with her so she could have it close to her and look at it whenever she wanted to think about David or a honeymoon in Paris or any of the other gross, disgusting things that he wrote in there. And Rose Warren continued, we're going to get these people off my butt. These people want you indicted. You're going to have to share. You're going to have to show that you can be completely honest when the hard questions come. You think Teresa's going to come up with all the specific kinds of details like she did with her alibi. Details like leaving the dress barn at 2:41, getting a call back from Randy at 3:08. Yeah, if any of you all listening to this think that Teresa's going to bring that level of details to this question about what was going on between her and David before she decided to put an end to things, you got another thing coming. Yeah, and she doesn't even start to answer the questions. She starts to try and find more protections for herself when she says, "And if you talk to him?" And Rose Warren replied, "What if I talk to him? When I talk to him, it's going to go down about the way it's gone down here with you. There's not going to be much difference. I'm going to ask him straight up questions, and when I think he's lying to me, I'm going to call him out on it. And that's the way it's going to be. I don't treat anybody differently." Teresa here, dreamers, ought to think that Rose Warren might possibly be just as sweet and nice to Pastor David as he is being to her. But I don't think she thinks that because she wants to think that they'll be mad and angry at him because they know he's the actual killer. Teresa wants to cast Pastor David as a cold-blooded killer obsessed with her, and she probably expects them to treat him accordingly. David isn't going to talk anyway, but Teresa thinks that she's in the lead here, and that couldn't be any further from the truth, because she's not. Rose Warren next says, "I'm calling it on you. I'm calling you. I don't think that you're being truthful with me about the nature of your relationship, and it's important." Teresa again makes this all about herself, stating, "Do you understand that I am scared?" "I understand you're scared. And if you tell me why you're scared, what exactly scares you, I will try to help you. We will get through this. Because when you say you're scared, I need to know exactly what it is that scares you. Because if that's what's keeping us from getting to the truth tonight, we need to take care of that. And we will. What scares you?" Teresa just sat there silent for quite a while. He continued, "You can talk to me. You're gonna feel better if you talk to me." Finally, making this all about her once again, her comfort levels, her reputation, her saving face, she says, "I just don't want this to get out to anybody." As if this hadn't been the worst kept secret in the community for the last 10 years. Everybody already knows. Rose Warren replied, "We're not going to wave red flags and tell the world, okay? Teresa, I already know what you're going to say, but I gotta hear it from you." And dreamers, cue the fake sobbing. I already went over the segment of audio, this part where she admits to having sex, and I went on about what a bullshit admission that was. Remember when she, after 10 years of a torrid affair, she says, "Yes, we had sex. You know that." You'll hear that part in the audio. So since I already went into this part of the conversation in this interview in great detail in a previous episode, I'll go ahead and skip over it. So what you're going to hear next in the audio is Rose Warren trying to continue to keep Teresa talking after she admitted to having sex with Pastor David. He said, "So you were in love with him. This must have been hard on him. The fact that you were leaving the church, that you told him you didn't want this, you gave him his phone back." Rose Warren still isn't aware that she threw the phone into the toilet the day of the murder. She never gave the phone back to Pastor David. I think she might have led him to believe that at some point. She hung on to it until Randy was dead and gone. And once he was dead, there's no need for a burner phone when you suddenly become a widow, right? Rose Warren continued, "You were trying to knock it off. You were trying to stop it. When he came into that office," and he's referring to the St. Patrick's Day confrontation, "is that what this was about? Did he come in there and tell Randy that you guys had been together? Did that ever come up?" Teresa said, No. And that's the truth for once. That didn't happen when he went in there with his wife. That cowardly bastard wasn't going to stand there in front of her and Randy and Teresa and admit to any wrongdoing on his part. In fact, what he did was he put her on blast about that officer that she fooled around with, Officer Matt. And all of that wasn't for Randy, I don't think, anyway. I believe it was a show for his wife, to prove to her that Teresa is a worse cheater than he is. Probably a way to try to smooth things over with his wife for the time being, because she had just found that phone the night before. So Rose Warren next said, David was telling Randy about this Bruner guy. Bruner, they had been redacting Officer Matt's last name this whole time, but they accidentally left it in at that point, so you're going to hear his name is Matt Bruner. And Teresa replied, he was telling Randy about it, and of course she's going to make this all about her once again. He was telling Randy about it because he was tired of other guys trying to come on to me. Yeah, all about her. No, honey, this was a show for his wife. I'm convinced of that. And tired of guys trying to come on to her? Is she like being serious right now? That woman is that much of a catch, I guess. I don't see it, but I think I'm kind of blinded by that tan. Rose Warren was like, okay, David was tired of other guys coming on to you? Like, he was having trouble believing the things that this woman was saying as well. Like, this is utter, like, bullshit. Teresa continued this cringe answer, and she said, because I would tell him, and I probably shouldn't have, because I just wanted a fresh start. I wanted it to end. I tried to end it a couple times before, actually last year. I tried to stop it. And Rose Warren said, how'd he take it? And at this point, Teresa laughed and said, not very well. You know, because she's such a heartbreaker, right? Rose Warren said, tell me about it. Well, he's, meaning Pastor David, not really an angry person. He doesn't get angry, but he just wasn't happy. What did he say? He said, I understand, 'cause I just told him. I said, this is not right. This is not what we're supposed to do. This is not what God wants for us. This is not the way it's supposed to be. And I don't remember what he said. And this was at the church? Yeah, I was in the kitchen. How long ago was this? Teresa said it was August of last year, actually. And yeah, 'cause he just keeps throwing it up in my face. So this was about the time that he bought this track phone. How is it that he ended up giving it back to you, and then you all continued to communicate? Because he kind of just slid it in there again. Kind of made me feel bad, I guess. So yeah, a guy makes you feel bad, and it causes you to want to go back to him when you're trying to repeatedly break up? What does that even mean? Whatever, Teresa. Rose Warren said, so this, as you're describing to me, this is pretty involved. This is pretty involved with Pastor David. She replied, yeah, it was. So, Teresa here has finally made a legitimate admission right there. But then she took it all back in her next statement when she said, yeah, it was more than I wanted it to be. This woman just cannot stop herself. What you're also going to hear in the audio clip for the first time is I think we hear Teresa say the whole leave it in God's hands garbage every time Pastor talks about their relationship, being together, and getting rid of their spouses. It will kind of become her mantra, her refrain that she keeps going back to now that she has openly admitted to having the affair with the pastor. I told him it's in God's hands. Over and over and over again, you're going to hear this. It's going to make you sick. He asked about a line in the love letter stating, you know, David wrote this letter here, and there's a line in here, I'm not in control of things yet, but when we are fully together, our birthdays will be exciting. Blah, blah, blah. What does that mean? I'm not in control yet, but when we're fully together. Teresa said, I don't know. What do you think it means when you read that? Maybe he had something in mind? No shit, Teresa. Rosewarne said, did he ever talk to you about anything he had in mind? That is like the most vague general question I've ever heard. And of course, people talk to each other about what they have in mind. Everything we talk about comes from things we generate in our mind. But Teresa, again, is still so stuck in denial mode, she will even deny that David ever talked to her about anything he had in his mind. But later on, she will talk about all the times David brought up killing Randy and killing his wife. She references them having this conversation over and over and over and over again. But here, she says he never talked about what was on his mind. So yeah, he asked, did he ever talk to you about anything he had in mind? Teresa replied, no. I always told him. During one of those conversations you never had about what he had on his mind, right? You always told him. What did you always tell him, Teresa? I always told him, if God wants us to be together, then he will put us together. I always told him that. Again, during those conversations they never had about what he had on his mind. So stupid. She goes on, and I always told him, I said, I love Randy, and I don't, and I hate doing this. I hated it. No, you didn't. You loved every single second of it. You loved all of the attention you can get from any man that you could get. Otherwise, this would not have carried on for 10 years and culminating in Randy's murder. You didn't hate doing this. You hated Randy. Rosewarne then asked, did Randy ever suspect? Teresa replied with a bunch of maybes. Maybe after, maybe the first, maybe after the second year, maybe, but he never really came out and said it or anything. The next part you're going to hear in the audio clips that we went over in episode 297, or I played for you in 297, it's where Rosewarne asked Teresa about having become pregnant by Pastor David and the fact that Randy had a vasectomy. I'm going to skip over talking about that again too because we already discussed it. And according to my notes, I think that's where this segment of the conversation cuts off in the audio. So in all, there were 3 occasions where Randy suspected Teresa. I mean, overall, he's going to suspect. Pastor David was a constant presence in their lives the entire time. So how could he not think it, you know? But there were 3 times when Teresa said Randy suspected that there was an affair. The first time was in 2002 when he found a very explicit letter that Teresa had written to someone named David that talked about all the sexually charged activities that they engaged in together. Teresa explained this letter away by telling Randy that she was working on making their sex life better. Yeah, by writing explicit letters to her church pastor. Ladies, anyone want to try that and see if it works to better your sex life with your husband? Yeah, I don't think I want to try it either. But for whatever reason, Randy decided to take Teresa's word for it. The second time was the pregnancy in 2004. That was what prompted him to change the beneficiaries of his life insurance policies from Teresa to his children. And the third time came in 2008 when Randy's suspicions were raised again for whatever reason, and he tried to leave the church. But it was some of his church members that told him unless he had definitive proof that he should give Teresa and the pastor the benefit of the doubt. So he did, and they stayed. After that, I fade out the audio clip after this portion of the interrogation, and it will pick back up at a point where they're going to talk about Teresa's burner phone. I'll get to that in a minute, but what I'm going to talk about next, you're not going to hear in the audio clips. And what it is you're not going to hear after they talked about Teresa's pregnancy, the detective goes into this monologue about how Teresa needs to be the one to start opening up and being honest. Otherwise, this whole thing is going to go really bad for her. Teresa stayed silent the whole entire time. It was quite blissful. Just staring. She's just staring right through Rose Warren as if he's not even there. But I'm pretty sure she's thinking about what she could give up in terms of useful information that will not incriminate her, but super incriminate Pastor David. She pushed around one of the papers that he had on the desk, one of the ones with the information about the track phones on it, and I think that gave her an idea because she finally spoke, giving them a tiny bit of information that she had been holding back, because that's what Rose Warren has been pressing her for close to 15 minutes. What is it that you're not telling? Teresa finally said, he tried to contact me on that phone, and I would never answer. Yes, they know this. You left each other voicemails. Just stop with the I would never answer the calls. It's bullshit. He left me a message. Okay, you didn't answer it. He left me a message. We know that. And I checked it that day. Rose Warren asked, what did it say? She replied, so we know she's lying. I honestly don't remember what he said. He implored her, you got to remember. I didn't even listen to all of it. I didn't want to hear it. So I heard his voice and I just erased it. I honestly don't. And he cut her off and said, you heard David's voice? She replied, mm-hmm. He left me a voicemail. Oh, God, I don't even know what he said. Rose Warren said, you know how important this is. You got to remember. That was the day. That's a day you'll never forget for the rest of your life. So, cue the sobbing once again as Teresa says, I know that. He asked, was this when you were driving from home? Teresa quickly answered no. But when he followed up with the question when, she had to stop herself to make sure that the time she's going to give him matches up with the rest of her lies. So she paused for a minute before she said, I think he left it when I was still at the office because I pulled the phone out and I had a message. I believed I checked it before I went to the bank. Then Teresa obnoxiously leaned in towards the detective and arrogantly said, and I did go to the bank. And he said, I was just saying, look, we'll keep checking. If you got the receipt, keep it, okay? What a bitch, huh? And I did go to the bank. And she bobbed her head like a fucking chicken. And I did go to the bank. Whatever. Maybe somebody would believe you if you would frickin' find some truth and say it for real. So what we're going to talk about next, you're going to hear in the audio that I uploaded. It will fade in with Rose Warren next asking her, what did you do with the phone that day? That was the day your husband died, right? Teresa replied, I have it. I had it. Where's the phone now? I don't have it anymore. What did you do with it? I threw it away. Where? I don't know. I don't know. Let me think. Hold on. This is code for let me try to think up a lie. And then she laughed. I tore it apart because I didn't want to communicate with him anymore. What a dumbass answer, right? I threw it away, but I don't know where. Not only that, earlier in the conversation, she jabbed her finger down on the table a half dozen times, adamant that she gave that phone back to that man right there, pointing at his picture on one of the papers on the desk in front of her. She continued, he tried to call me several times. He tried to call me on my cell phone and I wouldn't answer it. I knew it was him and I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to talk to him anymore. What were you doing with the cell phone that day? I didn't want to communicate with him. What am I doing with it? Why did you even have it? Well, I just had it. He gave it to me. That's how he communicated with me. But I, I don't even know if I even used it after that day that he came into my office to talk to Randy and I. I was so mad at him. She's lying. She did. She stopped using the phone as soon as she found Randy's dead body. I think when he texts me, I would read them and I would never respond. It's another denial. That's just ridiculous. Like, if you texted him, whatever, who cares? Your husband's dead. It's irrelevant. It's nonsense. Nobody cares. Everybody knows that you've been having a 10-year-long relationship with this guy, and you're going to say, I didn't want to text him? That's your biggest denial about this guy? I wouldn't want to respond to him. I didn't want to talk to him. I was mad. Next, Rose Warren pivoted back to the phone calls that were being made. He says, this phone made a call later in the afternoon. I mean, like late. Teresa replied with a tone of confusion. It did? I'd like to know when. But he's trying to look through some phone records. However, he doesn't seem to have the right pages. So he says, as I recall, the last time anybody used this phone that we know of, and I'm really not sure which of the 3 track phones he's talking about. The last time anybody used this phone that we know of, it was after we know Randy was killed. It was after, as I recall, it was like, I want to say 4 or 5 or something like that. So if that's the case, I'm going to say it was probably Teresa's phone, because that's about the time she found the body, and then shortly thereafter she went to go flush it. And what Rose Warren is doing here is he's trying to put the time frame surrounding the use of these burner phones, whether he's talking about hers or Pastor David's, but he's putting it around the time that he knows, based on the video surveillance, that Randy was killed or shortly thereafter. Either way, it's very suspicious that both phones that were being used pretty regularly, suddenly both of them go dark forever an hour or so after Randy shot to death. It reeks of a conspiracy if a conspiracy ever reeked. What you will hear in the audio is Teresa trying to think about what time frame to provide around the time that she got rid of her phone that jives with the story that she's last told. She says, I got rid of that phone. Yes, we know you flushed it right there at the crime scene, but she hasn't admitted to that yet. The final activity on it is going to give her away. The time the phone goes dark is the time she's supposed to be standing around outside the building where her husband lay dead. And that is going to look seriously incriminating if the phone shuts down forever while she's supposed to be screaming and flailing around on the lawn outside the insurance office. Teresa does a lot of pausing, lots of lots of clearing of her throat in order to buy herself time, some self-grooming as well. She's realizing she's locked into the time that she got rid of her phone, being in very close proximity to her being at the scene of the murder. After some pausing and stalling and and throat clearings, she finally fesses up to what she really did to her track phone. I've already gone over this portion of the interrogation when we talked about how she went to the bathroom with Kimberly Love and broke it and flushed it right there at the scene of the murder. That part is included in these audio clips. It is kind of funny if you do listen to it. She goes into this whole deal about going to the bathroom, the last time she checked her voicemail, and after that she went to the bathroom in order to break the phone into pieces and to flush it down the toilet. And in all of that, she pauses to say, and I did have to go to the bathroom. As if we just assumed she made up a lie about having to go to the bathroom in order to get rid of the phone. It's likely that her having to suddenly go to the bathroom might have triggered the idea of getting rid of the phone. You know what? She's not wrong if she assumes that we don't believe her. I wouldn't believe this woman if she told me she needed to go to the bathroom in the middle of her husband's murder scene either. She also says that the reason why she flushed the phone is that she didn't want to communicate with David Love, when we know the truth is that she kept in touch with him for quite some time after Randy's death via email. You will hear Rose Warren confront Teresa about what that looks like. The fact that she carried that phone around with her all day, and after you found your husband, you left a crime scene to go to the bathroom. While you were there, you destroyed a phone. You know what that looks like. All Teresa had to say for herself was the same thing she said to the last thing she confessed to. When she was told that they talked to Officer Matt Bruner and he said that it was more than a kiss, she goes, I know. When Rose Warren here says, you destroyed a phone, you know what that looks like? All she had to say was, I know. Rose Warren will go on to say how this looks, that she destroyed the phone essentially because she knew her husband was dead. She starts in with the denials again, but this goes on for a while. Teresa gets real quiet when she has to admit to yet another lie. I left all of the silences in, like I told you earlier, because it really paints a strong picture of what Teresa Stone is really like. Rose Warren peppers Teresa with some of the same questions, but she continues to issue denial after denial. She admitted to the last activity on her phone being her checking a voicemail that Pastor David left her, but she refused to admit what was said on that voicemail, insisting that she did not want to hear his voice, so she deleted it. The next thing you will hear in the audio clips is Teresa being confronted about having knowledge that Randy was shot before she ever called 911. I love that she did this because it's so damning, and I'll never really understand why Teresa called her parents before calling 911. Otherwise, she would have never made this critical mistake. Rose Warren asked her, you called your parents right after you found Randy, and what did you tell them? She said, I just told them that something happened to Randy and that I needed them to come to the office right away. Rose Warren stood up as he replied, are you sure that's what you told them? She didn't answer. You see, what you told them, because I got it from your mom and I got it from Miranda, what you told them is that Randy had been shot. She says, yeah, that's what I told them. At this point, I don't think Teresa is clearly seeing the implication of what Rose Warren is saying to her. It's probably a little bit more advanced thinking than she's really capable of, if I'm being honest. He said to her, well, that doesn't square with what you've told us up to this point, and that doesn't square with what you told the 911 operator. And that's a problem. That is a problem. You told your parents specifically that Randy had been shot. You knew that he had been shot because you told your parents that he had been shot. You told the 911 operator that you think he might have fallen, but you never told him that he had been shot. You kept that to yourself. When you talked to the ambulance dispatcher, the person who needs to know what's going on there medically, you never told him that he'd been shot. You'd been talked to 3 times now, and you've never said that. You knew he'd been shot, but you didn't tell anybody. Somebody told you he was shot. Somebody told you he was shot because you knew he had been shot, and you didn't want us to know that. That goes right in these phones. And these phones getting destroyed after the body is found, you know more than you're telling me. And that is how they're going to hang you, Teresa. Those kind of statements. And I told you, I've got reports up to here that's full of that kind of stuff. Who told you that he had been shot? How did you know that he had been shot? Why didn't you tell us? You are not being truthful with me, Teresa. Teresa finally spoke, but it's not going to go well since she's always trying to go with all the denials. She says, I don't know, okay? I didn't. And then she paused for a moment because she's about to throw all the blame back over onto Pastor David yet again. She just has to make sure that it sounds sort of plausible. So she says, he sent me a text and he told me, and then she starts crying, fake crying. Rose Warren interrupted her and said, who did? But Teresa does not want to say his name. Rose Warren ordered her to say it. And she finally whispered, Brother Love. Finally, it's the first time that Teresa has admitted to having information that Pastor David was the one who shot her husband, and she had this information at the very least right after the murder happened. Now, we know she had advanced knowledge, but here she's only willing to admit to knowing immediately after the murder. She's going to start providing an answer, but it really isn't going to answer the question as to how she knew Randy was shot. She replied, "He sent me a text and told me not to go to the office." Why? "I don't know why," she sobbed. "When did he send you the text?" "When I was on my way to the office." "From your house?" Now in the video, Teresa, she shakes her head no, but she subtly changes to yes. Rosewarren's confused, which is probably what Teresa's goal was, as he asked when, as in when did she receive the text. He's having to pull all of this information out of her by force. "Before you got to the bank or after?" She sobbed, "No. When I was on my way back to the office after I dropped Miranda off at the house, he sent me a text." She paused. She stammered. She breathed heavily and stalled before she said, "He sent me a text that said, 'Seriously urgent, do not go back to the office by yourself.' That's what he told me, and I ignored it." "What do you think he meant by that? When you read that, what do you think he meant?" "I don't know." "Didn't you call him?" "No, I didn't want to talk to him." "But you get a text like that? I was mad at him." "I understand you were mad at him, but you know, if I'm driving here to the police station to work and I get a text message from my wife that says, 'Don't go there, urgent, don't go there,' I'm going to call her and say, 'What the heck is this all about?'" Teresa tried to come up with an explanation, and she said, "I just thought maybe he was there with Randy, arguing with him, and he didn't want me to walk in on them. That's the first thing I thought of. I wasn't expecting, but when I got there—" Rosewarren cut her off and said, "Teresa, why did you not tell us that? Why would you not tell us something that important?" And she tried to say, "Because I was scared," but Rosewarren spoke over her and accused her of protecting Pastor David and said, "You're protecting this man, or you're protecting yourself also. You're scared, but you're trying to protect. You're protecting him and protecting yourself." The only place Teresa feels like she can go now is to say, "What do you want me to do? What do you want from me? I'm trying to tell you everything." No the fuck you're not. Rosewarren said, "Teresa, seriously, I want you to be the first person to come forward so that we have the opportunity to try to help you." "I don't want to help David. I swear, if David comes in here and he confesses to something that he's done, he'll be the first one. And you know what's going to happen? He's the one that's going to be given consideration. And everybody else that's involved in this is going to go right down the toilet. We're not going to be able to help them. I know Brother Love's not the only one involved in this. He's not the only one involved. He's obviously up to it to his eyeballs. But there's somebody else involved too." And Teresa here, playing dumber than dumb, she says, "Who?" And he says, "Remember when I told you that we have video?" She said, "Yes." He said, "All right, listen to me. I know more than I can tell you, but I'm telling you it's not just Brother Love. That means if you don't talk to me, if you don't tell me, we're going to have to give these jerks the consideration that we're giving you." Well, dreamers, obviously nobody else was involved but the two of them. So she might be confused as to what he's talking about because she knows she wasn't there, so she's not worried about being accused of being in on the actual shooting and being physically at the scene when it happened. But when he says that they have video and there's more than just one person involved, she knows that the other person involved is her, but she also knows that she wasn't anywhere near Brother Love during the time that he murdered Randy, and most of the day, basically. So she's dying to know what Rosewarren knows, but he's doing a pretty good job of not just stringing her along, but also dragging information out of her. Teresa asked again, "Who?" "He's the only one that told me. He just texted me and told me not to go to the office by myself." He asked her what else was said beside that, but she didn't answer. When did you first know that something could be off? That something just wasn't right? What text message, what phone call, what letter, what anything? What has ever been said to you prior to the 31st that something might be off? That somebody might do something extremely stupid, even if they just intended to go scare Randy? By now, Teresa's come up with a new story, so she's pretty calm because she's about to deliver it. She finally said, "The only thing I know," yeah, the only thing, right? "The only thing I know is that I text David from that phone on my way to the chiropractor's office. I told him, I said, 'You have messed up my life. Leave me alone.' And then he started calling me like crazy, and I didn't answer the phone. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to talk to him at all. And then he called and left a message. And I checked it, and he texted me and said, 'Oh God, what did he say? Oh, what did he say? Oh, what did he say? I am thinking, what did he say? Oh my God, what did he say? I know he sent me a text before he sent me that other one. Oh gosh, he sent me that text about, it was around 3 something. Okay, Miss 241, I left the dress barn. It was around 3 something. The first one he sent me was around 3 something. The second one he sent me was the one that said, 'Seriously urgent, don't go back to the office by yourself.' That was the last one he sent me." Wow. It's crazy, right? How vague she can get. When they first talked to Teresa about this exact same time frame 3 weeks ago, exact time frame, she was able to tell those detectives that she left the dress barn at 2:41, yet right here, she can't even recall the time she received the text message around 3 something, just 19 minutes later. And she has no clue what it said in it. Yeah, she knows what it said, if there was even a text, but she can't disclose the true contents of it because it's probably something super incriminating. Rose Warren next asked, "Was it closer to 5?" And she replied, "Yes." So she said 3 something, and now he says closer to 5, and she's agreeing with it. So I don't know. I think he made a mistake here by trying to feed her information, because she's going to say later on, or she can say, "Well, I didn't say it was 5. Rose Warren said that." He really wants to know what that text message said, and I know Teresa knows what it said if there was a text message, but she cannot tell the truth. She cannot come up with anything on the fly that quickly either that would make any kind of sense. You can feel how much she's struggling to keep her secrets here. And I don't know if she will ever answer the question or if there's any record of it to be found, but either way, she is not budging. Rose Warren continued, "Think about that text. It might be one of the most important things you do." Eventually, Teresa came up with a story that felt safe enough for her. And I do not believe it's the truth at all, but she gave it a go. She says, "Seriously, the only thing on that text was that he was going to the hospital to see one of our, members that was in the hospital. That's what he told me." On the audio, you'll hear Rose Warren ask for specific times and places that she was when she supposedly received these last 2 text messages from the pastor before their phones went silent. And then he tells her, "This is going to affect the rest of your life. Did you know what you were going to find when you got there?" She vehemently denied, "No, I did not. I did not expect that at all." Did you expect anything? And again, dreamers, this is an opportunity for Teresa to get out of denial mode and to start providing some answers surrounding the discovery of her husband now that several of her secrets have been revealed and her lies have been exposed. But she's still deeply entrenched in those denials. And she replies, "No, the only thing with him texting me that, the only thing I thought of was him and Randy are into it. But Randy never really tried to argue with him. He just tried to ask him to leave a lot, and he wouldn't leave." Does this bitch even hear herself? Randy would try to ask David to leave a lot. How many times do you need to ask somebody to leave? What does she mean by a lot? How many times was Pastor David in Randy's presence where he was forced to ask him to leave a lot of times? She thinks by saying Randy would never really try to argue, but instead ask him to leave a lot, the former Marine, to the guy who's been sleeping with his wife for a decade? Seriously, when you slow this down and pick apart the things that Teresa says, it would actually be kind of funny if it wasn't so evil. Rose Warren asked, why didn't you not tell somebody about these messages before now? I don't know. I guess I was just scared. Scared of what? And she replied with an answer that is so typical of this woman. Scared of what might happen to me. Of course. What might happen to her. Meaning going to jail for conspiracy to commit murder? That's what she's scared of, right? Of course she is. Because she did that shit. Rose Warren said, did you believe that Brother Love had something to do with this even before you came in here tonight? She said, do I believe? He said, no. Before you came in here tonight. She replied, oh. In the back of my mind. And then she went silent. Teresa wasn't about to say anything, so Rose Warren said, you had to ask him about the message. Your husband's been killed, and right before you got there, you get this all caps message that says, don't go there. How could you not confront him or talk to him? You had to talk to him about this. Teresa, infuriatingly, obviously, and stupidly continues to play dumb and says, about what? He said, about what that message was about. And she goes, oh, Rose Warren, he just kept going. He's probably so freaking done with this woman. You got that before you found your husband. And then Teresa replied with a non sequitur. I haven't talked to him. Rose Warren said, you haven't talked to him at the church over Easter weekend or anything? No, I was gone. And then he left. Yeah, you heard that right, dreamers. David Love absconded. He fled all the way to South Carolina. I think he first went to Colorado, then he went to South Carolina. And here she's denying all contact with him, but then she contradicts herself in the very next sentence. I haven't talked to him. I was gone. He left. And then he called me last night. What the fuck? The way she said this series of statements, it makes it sound like she's talking as fast as she can make stuff up in her head. Rose Warren asked, what did he say last night? And she said that he was praying for me. I was very short with him and I was not very nice to him on the phone. Did you ask him about the text message? No, because my family was around and one of my church members was at the house. Rose Warren asked, you know, the last 20 days, you never got on the phone to Brother Love and said, did you kill my husband? Why did you send me that text message? Did you ever try to discuss or try to get a hold of him? No, because every time he was at my house, there were so many people around. I understand that, but there are times when you could get a phone and talk in private. I didn't want to talk to him. You didn't want to find out who killed your husband? I was afraid of what he would say. Well, I would like to hear what he'd have to say. If somebody killed my wife and I suspected him and they tell me, you know what I'm going to do? That's great, because I'm going to go to the police. Teresa totally cut him off at this point and said, do you think he's going to tell me? Do you think he's going to tell me? And Rose Warren said, he has to explain the message. He has to explain. He has to explain why he sent that message, not to go to my office. Why? You had to know that my husband was going to be there with his head blown off. You had to know that, or you wouldn't have sent me a message like that. And she said, I didn't think about it that way. I thought maybe they were just arguing. I never thought I would find anything like that. The questions aren't getting any easier as Rose Warren next asked her, who would Brother Love conspire with to do something like this? And dreamers, I don't even think I have to tell you what Teresa's answer is going to be. A whole lot of nothing. Denying. She says, I have no idea. The correct answer would be you, Teresa. He would conspire with you to kill your husband. And she is so stupid to continue to sit there knowing that they know the answer to that question, but she's so committed. You gotta hand it to her. She said, I have no idea. And that's the honest truth. I have no idea. I always thought of him as an honest man. I, I, I don't know. I have no idea. Rose Warren finally said, well, you know he's not an honest man because he's had an affair with one of his congregation members for almost 10 years. Then he comes into your office and stirs up all kinds of crap between you and your husband. Teresa really loved hearing all that because the truth is, she's the one that's been stirring up crap everywhere she goes. She had the nerve to reply to that, I know. David Love's been stirring up problems, Rose Warren says, and she says, I know. He continued, and we haven't even discussed some of the stuff that's happened over the last 10 years. I'm sure you could write a book about all the ups and downs you've had with him over the last 10 years, and all the trash that we don't want to get into because we don't need to. But you know he's not a good man or an honest man. And then you get this text message from him 5 minutes before you find your husband murdered, and you don't come to the police and tell us? Teresa! And she gasped, I'm sorry. But Teresa, it all goes back to looking like a conspiracy that you and him were working together. She started sobbing again as she threw out more denials. No, never. Everything points to that. No, I told him to leave me alone and he wouldn't stop texting me. So the audio clips that I uploaded in episode 297 is going to cut off here, and it's going to pick up later on where Rose Warren will continue to try to pry the things that David Love and Teresa talked about. He wants to get that information out of her. I'm going to go over some of the content of the interrogation that was edited out of the audio. There's a lot of pretty good stuff that I really don't want to leave out. So Rose Warren is going to try some tactics to get Teresa to open up more. He tells her that he's got guys heading out to pick up David Love and bringing him in for questioning along with his adult son. You know, the one that Randy wanted fired and excommunicated because of his sexual orientation. He wants to scare Teresa into thinking that they're going to reveal the truth, so he wants her to come with the truth first. None of this is going to work because we know Brother Love is going to shut up and lawyer up. And deep down, I think Teresa knows it too. The audio clip you listen to, or will listen to, skips over about 10 minutes of this conversation, and then it picks back up with Teresa trying to admit to some of the conversations that she and the pastor had about their relationship, and they talk about getting rid of Randy. I hope you don't mind all the long pauses and silences that I left in. I do really think it provides you an idea of how much less Teresa has to say now that she's being confronted versus when she has the floor to talk about irrelevant nonsense. Of her conversations with Pastor David, Teresa says, he would just tell me that he would take care of it. Rose Warren asked, could take care of what? Could take care of him and I being together. When was the last time you had a conversation like that? I mean, estimate it, ballpark range. Couple months ago? Couple months? How often would he talk like this? She didn't answer the question. She said, and I would tell him, it's not in your hands. It's in God's hands. If he wants us to be together, he'll put us together. And I said that to him several times, and I told him. And she raised her voice to act shocked and surprised when she next said, and he, if anybody, he should know. Rose Warren said, of course he should. She says, and he knew I didn't like it when he said it either. And I kept telling him, it's not in your hands, it's in God's hands. Rose Warren asked her what were his exact words that you remembered. Try not to paraphrase. Try to tell me what came out of his mouth. You can hear Teresa getting exasperated because she did not expect to be having to come up with this many details and lies. She goes quiet and then she never answers. So he says, let me ask you a little easier question. How does a conversation like that even come up? I mean, put it into context for me. How would something like that even come up? How would that even start to happen for him to make a comment like that? Of course, Teresa's answer is a lie, is her continuing to try to distance herself, continuing to avoid taking responsibility for anything. Even conversations that she had with Pastor David, there are times she won't even admit to engaging in conversations with him. And you'll hear it in the audio when she supplies, well, I never really talked much. Well, based on her baseline that we've seen in these interviews prior to this one, that's a crock of shit too. She runs her mouth more than anybody in this world would ever want to have to listen to. And she continues to avoid answering these direct questions. She tries to provide answers that dance around the question she was asked, but it really provides very little in the way of useful or truthful answers. She continued, he would just start the conversation and just say that, we would do good together in the Lord's work. And he would say, God sees what Randy's doing to you, and he sees what Kim's doing to me. And he kept throwing up Bible verses at me and what other Bible characters did in the Bible. Can't this woman get more redundant in her obvious attempts to buy time as she can try to search her tiny little mind for more and more lies? And she went on, and how they murdered and God still blessed them and stuff like that. K-Dreamers, I'm not familiar with the Bible all that much. Like, not really at all, if I'm being honest. But generally speaking, it's my understanding, for the most part, that the Bible frowns on murdering. I'm pretty sure that they edited that in when they were throwing together the commandments. I mean, it's number 6 on the list, right? So maybe it wasn't a huge priority, like to be number 1, but still on the not okay list. So what do you think Teresa said her reaction was to Pastor David saying things like, people in the Bible murdered, but they were still blessed by God? Well, let me tell you. She said, and I was like, and I kept telling him, and I'm like, that was then. This is now. God's the one that's in control, not us. We have no control over that. Rose Warren said, did he use the word murder? No. What did he say? Teresa contradicted herself again and said, he never said anything. He just when he would have a conversation, he would take care of it. Like he would take care of it if I wanted him to. And I would say, leave it alone. God will take care of it. Rose Warren asked, what do you think he meant when he said that? I can take care of it. Be honest with me. What do you think he meant? Back to the denials, Teresa replied, I don't know. I don't know. Did you ask him? What do you mean by that? Well, yeah. And she contradicted herself again right there. When he asked her what she thought Pastor David meant when he said that he would take care of it, she said she had no idea. But then when he asked her if she asked him what he meant, she said her reply was, well, yeah. So do you have an idea? Did you ask? Do you know? What's your answer? And Rose Warren, he wants to know too. He said, and what'd he say? And she replied, well, he kept referring to, and never provided an answer. And the audio clip that I uploaded cuts off right there. And by the way, Dreamers, the YouTuber that I got this audio from did the research and referenced the same exact Bible verse that Teresa was referencing. And later on, she would say that Pastor David referred to himself as a warrior. And the fact that Teresa is well aware of this Bible verse that's being referenced, then she should be very, very concerned about Pastor David's intentions. She would have been worried that the pastor was turning homicidal over their affair. But she wasn't worried because she very much matched that homicidal energy. What the host of the YouTube channel said that I got this audio from, and his channel's called The Crime Scene, as in SEEN. He said that the Bible verses talk about Israel's warrior King David. King David had commissioned the killing of Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, because he wanted to take her as his wife. Pastor David apparently would say that King David would still be blessed by God even though he committed a murder. But Teresa didn't specifically reference the verse or how Pastor David was using it to justify his actions. And the fact that Teresa will later on say that David referred to himself as having a warrior in him, this is what he was talking about. This guy actually viewed himself as King David of the Bible. He had plans to murder Randy in order to take his wife, just like King David in the Bible wanted to murder Uriah in order to have his wife. And again, if Teresa was told this over and over again by Pastor David, then she knew. She absolutely knew what the plan was. Pastor David wanted to act out his favorite Bible story, taking somebody else's wife by killing him, be blessed by God, and the Bible character just so happened to also be named David. And Teresa was very, very much on board with this. Anyway, Teresa's silence continues for a few more seconds until Rose Warren repeated his question. What did he say, Teresa? You can tell that Teresa made sure her answer implicated Pastor David, and at the same time, she will try to get the subject of guns off of herself and onto him, which she's been desperately trying to do. This answer that she gives is just as self-serving as the rest of them, but I don't think it's a good strategy because, well, nothing that Teresa does is good, but I don't feel like it was a good strategy for her because she's actually removing some of the distance that she tried to put between herself and Randy's guns by bringing up the fact that the pastor spoke to her about Randy's guns prior to Randy's murder. She finally said, he just kept referring to Randy's guns. This is the first time that Teresa has talked about Pastor David and any kind of interest in Randy's guns. Rose Warren replied, I want to hear about that. Yeah, I bet he frickin' does. Teresa replied, I mean, that's all he told me. What kind of nonsense? All Pastor David said was, I'm referring to Randy's guns. I mean, this just gets better and better. But she continued, Now, as far as Randy showing him his guns, I don't know about that. Rose Warren said, well, try to make me, because I wasn't there, keep in mind, I wasn't there. So I'm trying to piece this together in my mind. But you're kind of being a little spotty here. A little? You say he was referring to Randy's guns, but I need to know specifically, what did he say about Randy's guns? How did he say it? What did he say? Teresa replied with more nonsense. Well, that's all he said. He just said, and Rose Warren cut her off and said, well, I mean, he didn't just say, I'm referring to Randy's guns. He said something within a different context. What did he say? I mean, he didn't just say, I'm referring to Randy's guns. He said something within a different context. What was it? What did he say exactly? He's starting to stammer because he's so desperate to get these answers out of her. And Teresa is exasperated again as she replied, he just said, well, you know, Randy has showed me his guns in his gun case. And I was like, okay. And here she puts her hand up to her mouth and starts some burping and more stalling, whatever you want to call it. And she said, sorry. And then Rose Warren repeated, what did he say? He said what? And she replied, well, that's all he would say. I mean, that's all he would say. He would just say, Randy showed me his guns. His gun in his gun case. That's all he would say. Is this during the same conversation when he's talking about, I can take care of this? You know, we can be, obviously he's trying to say that you guys can be together somehow. Say, was this in the last couple of months? Or if you have to go back further, that's fine. But within the last couple of months, how many times did this type of conversation come up between you and David Love? The way you're talking about Randy and taking care of things and maybe you guys being together and guns. I mean, how many different times did this come up that you can remember? After some more stalling, Teresa replied, I honestly don't know. I know it came up more within the last couple of months. Okay, are we talking more than 10? And Teresa quickly said, no, less than 5. Teresa said, well, 5, 6 maybe, something like that. I love how Miss 241 at the dress barn can't come up with anything more specific than that. Where would these conversations take place at? She stalled some more and said, where would they take place at? He said, mm-hmm. She said, and she's stalling and stalling and stalling. Well, mainly on the phones, I guess. He said, so these are telephone conversations, they're not face-to-face? No, I hardly ever saw him face-to-face that much. Yeah, because you weren't trying to conversate if they ever had a chance to be alone, but I'm sure they spoke on the phone constantly. They don't live together, and obviously they're married to other people, so the phone is their lifeline to each other. I'm sure they talked every single chance they could, and after 10 years of that, they were over it and ready to take their relationship to the penitentiary. Rose Warren asked, so these are phone conversations? And he paused to think about that and then said, once again, how would a conversation like that actually come to a point? How do you work up to that? You know what I'm saying? Well, he always talked about how his day was or how his night was at home. And he would ask me how mine was, and I would say fine. And stalling, and no further answers. Rose Warren asked, if you could just try to recall one of those conversations and just, I know this is hard, but I have to get this into context correctly because I don't want to get the wrong idea here. I don't want to jump to conclusions. And the best way not to is to get good, accurate information. So if you could lead me into how a conversation like that would actually take place. And at this point in the video, Teresa throws her head back. She clearly does not want to talk about this at all. And I would be willing to bet anything that the reason why she can't bring herself to say what actually was said is because using Randy's own gun was probably her idea. This is a woman who is very chatty and very controlling, who preys on and uses weak men. Men weak both in the heart and in the mind. And I'm sorry to say, but even Randy was like this to an extent. Otherwise, I don't think he would have put up with Teresa and her philandering. But there is a lot to be said about choosing to stay with a cheating spouse for as long as he did. And he may have had his own reasons. That doesn't necessarily mean that he was weak, per se. Maybe he wanted to keep his family together. That takes a stronger person than I could be. Maybe he chose to turn a blind eye to it. Maybe he was having affairs too. Maybe he was afraid of Teresa and her overbearing personality type. Maybe Randy's religious values guided him in that the right thing to do was to stay committed to his vows. Maybe the plan was to leave her eventually, perhaps when both of their kids got to college. Maybe Teresa is just an outrageously incredible and amazing woman. Nah, that couldn't be it. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the opposite. Maybe he simply didn't love Teresa, possibly even hated her, and he just didn't care what she did. Teresa finally came up with a little bit more to say. Well, he would just say that he missed me, and I would say, I miss you too, and more stalling and stalling and stalling. And he would always ask me, he would always ask me, how's Randy treating Miranda? And stalling and stalling and stalling. I don't know. Rose Warren said, so you talk about family stuff? And she picked up what he just said and made it part of her own statement, saying, yeah, we would just talk about family stuff. And she's breathing some more, and she's exasperated. She's sighing and stalling. And then he asked, who would initiate this kind of discussion? And she quickly jumped over that. Oh, not me. I never did. Well, how would he typically initiate something like that, where you're talking about guns and stuff? Teresa again used this opportunity to go back to her denials, and she stated, well, I never said anything. She literally wants us to sit here and believe that after all the information that we know up to this point, that she never mentioned guns. In fact, she never said anything. That's what she's trying to say here. David's sitting there talking, and she's saying nothing. Nobody's buying this. Rose Warren said, I'm saying within the conversation, though, how would he initiate that type of a, and she cut him off and said, it would only happen if he was angry or mad at Randy. That was the only time it would come up. As if this guy has a right to be angry at the man married to the woman he's been messing around with for 10 years. The nerve, right? I don't even know if that's true. Teresa just might be trying to give a motive for David to want to kill Randy. Oh, you guys had a fight, a spousal disagreement. I'll shoot him for you. That's reasonable, right? So Rose Warren next asked, what would cause David to get so angry at Randy, just for an example? She said, well, maybe an email that he got from him about finances. And dreamers, I'm certain the investigation has already revealed the grievances that Randy had with the pastor, the daily operations of the church, and how David was handling the church's money. We know that was a huge trigger for the pastor. It's likely what got him from just talking about killing Randy to actually doing it. Rose Warren said, yeah, okay, we've heard a lot about that. Okay, so he would get angry about Randy blowing off about something, and then how would that transition into, and Teresa replied, well, she cut him off and said, well, he would just say, well, you know, I can take care of it. And Rose Warren said, I can take care of it? How many times have you ever heard him use language like that? And she said, I can take care of it? And he said, or anything similar with the same implication. Teresa stalled and stalled. She tossed her hair back. She looked up at the ceiling again and stalled some more. And she's like, oh, my stars. She's stalling and stalling and stalling. And then she laughed. And she's doing some tongue clicking. I mean, it wasn't that often. If it would have been, I could remember a lot more. Rose Warren was getting annoyed, and he challenged her. But you said in the last couple of months or so that it had been cranked up a little bit. And yes, dreamers, she did just say that. I think she forgot. So this bullshit about not remembering because it wasn't that often just isn't going to fly. But she sidestepped that again and said, well, that's probably when, about the finances and stuff have been a little more. So another answer, non-answer. Okay, my dreamers, even though the conversation as it is right now between Detective Rose Warren and Teresa Stone hasn't really ended, the subject matter, I kind of like to cut it off where we get to a good stopping point and they completely switch topics. They kind of do, but the next section that I'm going to record is actually included in the audio that I uploaded, so I think that's a good place to stop. It's about an hour and a half into the interrogation tapes that if you listen to or are going to listen to, so it's about halfway through. I just reached the 2-hour mark on this episode, so that's a good place that I like to stop. We will pick it up again in episode 301. I'm so excited to be into the 300s finally. I've been trying to get here, it feels like for 2 years, where Rose Warren is going to ask Teresa about any discord between her husband and the pastor, leading up to Randy deciding that they're going to leave the church for good. This would be about a week and a half before he was killed. So that's all I've got for tonight. I'll be back very soon with the next part of our recap and discussion of Teresa Stone's interrogation. And trust me, it gets really good, especially the next morning when Stone Cold gets to go toe-to-toe with FBI agent Virgil Garner. I want to thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate you all from the bottom of my heart so much. For patrons, I promise that as soon as I get done with this, I'm going to get back to the next 2 to 3 episodes uploaded for you in the same quick succession that I am here on the free show in order to make up for taking so long to get back to it. I'm anxious to talk again about Seth Jackson and his murder out there in Florida. I do have some California cases I plan on tackling soon as well. And there's been a lot of shows featuring cases that happened during COVID and post COVID that are just really wild. Brand new cases that are so twisted. And I'm looking forward to getting myself and the show back on track. We are on pace to episode 400 now, and I'm so grateful to still be here. Thank you all again for listening. I love you all. And until next time, sweet dreams.